We would need Chanhee's word for that. I'm not
Okay, all right. Okay.
Chanhee. Okay, we are live.
Oh, we are live. Greetings, everybody. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope the stress of near the end of the semester is not driving you crazy. We have an incredible opportunity today for us to understand more about AI and art. So let me just say a few words, and then we'll get to our guest who have so much to offer. AI is not new. It's been around for quite a while, since the 50s. Marvin Minsky and many others did some great pioneer thinking and working that led us to today. The difference now is we're connected to so much data, and computers are so much more powerful. There is a healthy and unhealthy mix of excitement, anxiety, and fear, which is often what happens when we have new technologies and they arise. And AI hits these anxieties a bit deeper. How will these changes affect us? How will it affect our work, our entertainment, our sense of what is true and what is real? We will not get into that today, but we will talk about how AI and artists can work together. There have always been some artists that early on find new ways to work within these new technologies, using them as a new tool and a new way to create, and perhaps to create a new visual and audio language. Many of us are curious about jumping in and not sure where or how to start. Today, we are lucky to have 4 pioneers who can talk about their work, what tools they use, how they use them, and what they look for in great AI art. They're David Stout, Ira Greenberg, Kevin Page, and Lynn Hirschman-Leeson. I will intro each of them before we start talking. I hope by the end of the session that each of you will explore how these new tools can help you create new work and have an understanding of how to look at AI art and a way to determine what is good AI art, and give our art history community folks a lens to look at this new medium. And please, as we go on with this, if you have any questions, and you will have some questions, put them in the chat. We will have time at the end for Q&A. So we're going to start with David Stout. David Stout is a visual artist, composer, and performer exploring cross-media synthesis and interdisciplinary approaches to new genres, bridging the arts. He holds an Inter-Arts M.F.A. from California Institute of Arts, where he studied with the great Ed Emshwiller, one of my favorite experimental filmmakers, Jules Engel, Jim Pomeroy, who taught here at UTA, Michael Scroggins, and the great and magnificent Bill Viola. His award-winning works include live cinema performance, interactive video installation, electro-acoustical music composition, and immersive telematic video events that emphasize multi-screen projection and extension of performance, audience, and architecture. And he just recently finished a commissioned work for Temple Emmanuel, which is pretty amazing, using AI. So David, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you work, and yeah, take it away.
Okay, I'm going to do a little screen share here. And you should all see a little white dot.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Well, I already got an introduction, so we know that. I want to talk a little bit about the history of my work and how it flows into the use of AI. And I want to start with a primary digital technique that I've been working with for the last 20 years, which is transcoding, the ability to turn one digital element into another, or one kind of data stream into another form. In this case, in my early work with Cory Metcalf, we formed the duo NoiseFold, and this came out of my work in A-life, or sort of synthetic ecologies, and into a more performative environment where we worked with real-time generative animation, where the data streams were turned into sound and music. A fundamental aspect of the name of our duo, NoiseFold, is noise. And so what you're looking at is a screen capture of 2D black and white video noise. Interestingly, this is a kind of a very important image for us in terms of the concepts behind our work, in that noise represents a field of all possibilities, a kind of prima materia, which is a term attributed to Aristotle, in which any number of things, or all things, if you will, can emerge from this noise field if it is filtered, amplified, and sifted in various ways. This took me into working with particle systems. And in this particular image is taken from a piece called Shadowbox Attractions that explores a kind of virtual particle chamber where different attractors and repellers can be placed within a virtual space, and various kinds of trajectories, cloud formations, things that look like dust bunnies scurrying into the corners, etc., could be created. And out of this work, it occurred to me that essentially any kind of image could be created exploring noise fields. However, in this case, if I'm using 12, let's say 12 attractors and repellers, I can do these kind of primitive images, which are actually quite lovely, but it would be much harder to do, say, a photorealistic image. It would take, you know, thousands, millions of attractors and repellers to do something like that. So this work, and my work in general, takes many different forms. This is an image from Shadowbox Attractions that was presented in a festival in Poland as a one-screen installation. It's been a three-screen installation, and it also, the system generates sound. So today I'm really just showing images because they're the most reliable and quickest thing to do in a streaming presentation. But most of my work involves equal amounts of sound, music, sometimes live performance, and image. Following up on that, NoiseFold did a series of installations exploring the other aspect of our work where the folding comes in, using 3D forms that are mixed in various ways on the fly, sometimes with our, literally through gestural control, or banks of low frequency oscillators or drawn envelopes, etc., to create these real-time, oftentimes slowly changing environments. So this piece is called Melt. And we then added VR into the work to create worlds within worlds where every aspect of the environment is in constant flux. So there's not a landscape that is static, like a figure ground kind of thing. Instead, the viewer is essentially the figure within a constantly shifting ground. Now, the same idea can be applied to objects. This is actually two virtual objects, and it's from a performance called Hypnomancy. And in this case, the motion, the scale, the size of these are mapped to several infrared sensors so that I can literally use my hands to move these forms around in space. And as I'm talking about transcoding, as these forms transform, they emit sound. So this brings us up to another kind of performative interface or generative interface with AI. And so I just want to say abracadabra. And that this word abracadabra, of course, has a kind of almost a comedic connotation now that we think of when we think of performative magicians. But it's actually an Aramaic phrase that means I will create as I speak. And in a very real sense, there is a kind of magic in this sense of what I'll say, generating in near real time images out of dust. So like many other people, some of my first experiments in this kind of using some of the common sort of entertainment-oriented generative apps. This is Wombo Dream. People seem to like memes that are based on puns. So this is Francis Bacon and eggs. And you can kind of quickly see the kind of mashup potential in this medium. In a sense, it's an apotheosis of the remix culture, the mashup, and it's very much tied to the longer tradition of conceptualism in the arts, in that we can generate forms and hybrid ideas very much through speaking or thinking, if you will. So I want to just touch on a few. This is such a very large topic. In a sense, AI is a Timothy Morton hyperobject, because it is so vast and its implications are so large that it's really hard. It would be very hard for us in the short time we have to really cover all of the issues. So I'm going to just talk about a few of the things I'm interested in. And the first one, which I know is shared by many, is this idea that artificial intelligence really is the wrong name for at least generative AI image and sound synthesis. In a sense, it's really more of an automated ideation or amplified imagination. And I guess the last one I would go with is what the fear that's presently in the space is, that it's autonomous instantiation, that it's an entity with a mind of its own that's just going around doing things not related to us as human beings. So automation is, automation has its problems. Certainly automation has put us in a very bad way in terms of global warming, for instance. In the sense of this as a medium, what it enables me to do is create very large image sets. One can, I suppose, become almost addicted to this generative possibility, or become sort of gluttonous in that you're swimming in the sea of images. And so I would stress that a huge part of this moves us artists into really embracing the fact that we are curators, that curating the output is really important. If I hand my prompts off to someone else and they generate 1,000 images with the same prompt that I've come up with, I have sort of a sense that the curatorial aspect of selecting what is the interesting image would not necessarily be, it's not universal, in terms of the quality of the output. So a huge part of what I'm doing is curating the generative stream. Natural language processing is a game changer, in that I think it's going to find its way into all kinds of human computer interfaces, and is going to change the nature of the way we interact with computers. And so there's also this critique that it's just, you just talk to the machine, or you just type something in and it instantly does the thing, so thereby you aren't doing anything. And I just want to point out that language is the greatest human technology, that language does, if we try to learn a language at a much older age, it's a rather difficult thing. We learn it effortlessly, to some extent anyway, when we're younger. And so that's deceptive that it is as simple as we think it is. But it is indeed very powerful. The collaborative nature of this environment is really interesting to me, in that it decenters the author, because we can now interact with renowned artists from the past, or we can train the machine on, let's say, the work of all of our friends, and then begin creating hybrid works that way. So it doesn't have to necessarily be famous artists of the past. It also, we have to acknowledge that these very large models that have been created is the efforts of large teams of people that are distributed across the globe, and that not all of their working conditions are necessarily good. So we are in collaboration with a very large sort of social network, and it has its pluses and minuses. I'm very interested in the forum because it accelerates hybridity, which is an essential aspect of my own work, in that I'm always looking at the way one discipline or one medium becomes another. We can use it to the AI to basically inform traditional practices. A lot of my students are using it in the design and ideation aspects of projects that lead to performances, films, and sculpture, among other things. The other aspect is the boundary dissolving nature of the medium, in that it gives us near instantaneous aesthetic time travel across historic periods. If that's something one is interested in, I'm very interested in that aspect of it. It allows rapid prototyping with multidisciplinary concepts. It disrupts the notion of photographic truth, which of course is causing a great deal of stress. But we've really been working in a field, for those of us who identify as new media artists, we've really been working in the field of simulation for a rather long time. So it doesn't seem perhaps as radical to us as it has to the general population. One of the maybe distressing things for artists who have really have a refined aesthetics is the kind of lowbrow pop surrealism that is the sort of glutton of memes on the internet. We see a lot of sort of not very well thought out images or stereotypical stereotypes that we would probably rather not see amplified. But at the same time, it's very revealing. It reveals how colonized our imaginations are. And I want to emphasize that this instantaneous image generation really gives us an insight into the imagination. It's an amplifier of the imagination. And so it is what it is. We have a tendency to anthropomorphize the machine in a sense, or cast it as something alien in relationship to ourself. But really, it is, we are embedded in the machine, and it is a relationship that we have that is reflective. It's essentially a collective mirror. And so from that angle, I think it gives us great insight into ourselves, potentially. We are on the cusp. It's already happening in the labs. It just hasn't really been released yet. And that is real-time AI, which is going to give us a sort of a next level ability with uncanny clones, actors, avatars, and phantoms. It will also allow us to channel fluid architectures and immersive ambient settings of various sorts that are done on the fly. And so I'm very interested in how we coax and ride and work with these things, which requires new kinds of hybrid interfaces that aren't just merely language oriented. And in the end, I will say that it instantiates the dream time. It's very much like an ability to be in a waking dream, which cinema already had that quality, but this is sort of, I will say, the next level cinema. And cinema ultimately is one of the things I'm most interested in exploring with AI. So I want to take a very quick tour through some of the works that I've been doing with AI. And so this piece is called The Emptiness of Victory. It is a print that is about 74 by 44 inches, something like that. And it is essentially a kind of storyboard, but it also plays with this idea of collaborating with deceased artists. So I'll focus on one image in particular. This is called Pink Release, and it is I don't know if you can identify the artist, but the artist that I'm invoking here is Cy Twombly. So moving on from there, I did a series that has been exhibited. It's called Cosmograms, and these are prints, 20 by 20 prints. And in this work, I really was looking at materiality, and the material in this is tar, hair, flower petals, fur, and it's more apparent in that image, it's actually poured onto silk. Of course, this is all virtual, but it's a different way of working than invoking various artist names. This particular series hasn't been exhibited yet. It's called The Womb Tenders. And in this case, it focuses on the womb as a kind of universal creative analogy or metaphor. And you can see that the womb, this stylized womb image, has been placed in a gallery setting. So this is very much, to me, it both is an elevation, or if you will, of feminine empowerment and the archetype of femininity, but also of artistic creativity. And lastly, I'm moving very briskly here because we have a lot to talk about today, is the piece that Bart mentioned that was recently premiered as a projection on the Olan Sanctuary at Temple Emmanuel. The title of this piece, In Their Arms We Hold the Sky, is a kind of meditation on the situation we find ourselves in with the great die-off. So it is both a celebration of the creative force and of its collapse. And in this case, I'll just talk about this image here. Is a composite of 240 very small illustrations done in AI that are mapped to 240 very small 3D models that can be modulated and reshaped in real time. And then the whole thing is mapped to a particle system that is controlled by a series of strange attractor algorithms. And so this kind of comes full circle. I'm using a similar thing in this section of the work with bee swarms. There's a close-up that we can see. So this is a hybrid between the ways that I'm working with real-time generative 3D animation and sonification mixed with AI. And this is going forward, at least in the next couple of projects I'm doing, utilize this approach. And lastly, I would just wanted to have a shout out to my comrade, Ken Rinaldo. He and I are working on a curatorial project, creating a web-based kind of ongoing exhibit of those artists that are groundbreaking in the field of AI and machine learning, and that would cover the sort of area of sound artists, visual artists, filmmakers, etc. And that is that's what I have to say today.
David, thanks so much. They're just really astounding, really very important. I think that sets the table for all the kind of ways of thinking. If we have time at the end, I wanted to sort of hear what tools specifically you're using, because I think that would help us, because everybody's using slightly different tools, and it would be nice to get that, but we need to move forward. So next up is Ira Greenberg. Ira is the director of the Center of Creative Communication and professor at SMU with a joint appointment at the Meadows School of the Arts and Lyle School of Engineering. Previously, he was associate professor at Miami University in Ohio, not in Florida, where he held a joint appointment with the School of Fine Arts and Interactive Media Studies program, and was affiliate member of the Department of Computer Science and System Analysis. Greenberg's research and teaching interests include generative NFTs, drawing and painting, aesthetics and computation, expressive programming, emergent forms, net-based art, artificial intelligence, and stupidity, physical computing, computer art, pedagogy, and anything else that avoids meetings, or so he says. He is also very interested in post-computational practice, which is something that I would like to hear you talk about, and coding, which is very important. Ira helps me understand that when you use software, you're letting other people determine your universe, and he's been doing a lot of work in AI. So Ira, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bart, and welcome. Thank you for other panelists. It's an honor to be among you. I'm going to share my screen and just jump right into this. Let's see. Okay, pass to the side. I want to talk about the post-computational part. I'm glad. Thank you for bringing that up, Bart. It's something that I've been kind of hoping to get out there more, and so I'm excited to be able to talk about that. I just want to clarify one thing. It's the Center of Creative Computation. There had been, I think you said the Center of Creative Communication, but it's computation.
I'm sorry, my bad.
No worries. No, I just gotta get the billing in there. I'm sort of an unrepentant material formalist, I think. Even though I spend most of my time with code and AI, my background is drawing and painting. This is a painting of my brother and I. Those of you who have siblings close in age might identify with this, but and this is sort of my background. And I was obsessed with the data of observation before I was dealing with the data of computation and physics and all that kind of stuff. I was just looking and really, really fascinated with how the visual field could be sort of turned into data in a sense, and then reinterpreted onto this kind of simple geometry or rectangle. And I don't feel like things have changed. It's just that the material has gotten much more complex for me. I'm going to do this massive jump now. So I went from this deep painting and drawing background, which was both a BFA and an MFA. And I was doing this kind of moonlighting computing thing in the 90s, right? Mostly pragmatically trying to pay the bills. And as much as I tried to keep the coding and the computation apart from my painting and drawing, which I thought of as kind of more of the important work, my fascination and really obsession into computing just took over. I just couldn't really help myself, including computer manuals, which I loved. And that led to this ridiculously long book on processing, right, near the beginning of processing. So that's sort of how I guess I was introduced into this world in many ways, writing that initial book on processing. The code studies that I did early on were, they start out, and I'm not even showing these, they start out very random. And I'd like to actually bring that discussion to what's happening in the NFT space. But when I first started playing with code, it became about geometric abstraction, playing with random functions, playing with trig functions, not having so much control that I would have with a paintbrush or a pencil. But it was just sort of the emergent generative power of writing code that was sort of randomized with that excitement of some type of, something coming out of the machine that I couldn't totally predict. After a while, I got kind of, bored is maybe too negative, but I just wanted to see something that was a little bit less random, less sort of a kind of an artifact from that material. And so I started sculpting more with code. And so this became really a deep dive for me in terms of back into the math that I, basically didn't pay attention to until I was about, 30, to try to understand how I could actually use math to create form. And this goes back to around 2004, I think. These initial studies, which were really important, they were called protobytes. And I was fascinated with this idea of an artificial life form, creating systems. Some of these eventually moved. But at the time, both technically what was available to us on my own chops as a code artist, these were two-dimensional. These were sort of iterative drawings that I figured out ways of making them feel like they were three-dimensional forms with internal structures, but they're all iterative two-dimensional forms. I'm going to jump again, I'm jumping through time. This is a piece that is on FX Hash. It's now a piece that I've done. I think this piece was maybe last November, where this is actually now generative sculpture. So I'm writing code, I'm writing physics. I have, hundreds of thousands of lines of code by now, where I can leverage my own libraries. And so this collection is, every time you run it, you'll get, a different one of these kind of protobytes, and you can interact with it. And again, it's a generative sculpture written completely with code. And it's still the same stuff. I've gotten better, and the technology's gotten better. But this trajectory, which is like in 4 slides, is 25 years, I guess. And the ideas haven't really changed that much. I still draw and paint. You can see this is a piece that came out about the same time, where I took some of my prototypes that I'd written with code and I put them through AI. And so now I'm going back to drawing, painting almost, with the AI sort of conditioning my code-based studies that came from the drawing studies. And so again, it's all just kind of, like this giant Lorenz attractor or something, just kind of keeps wrapping it on itself. What was fascinating to me, and what happened with the AI for me, was that up until really stable diffusion releases and things like DALL-E and Midjourney to some degree, the aesthetics of AI art didn't appeal to me as much, because that kind of imprint of the aesthetic was so strong that when I looked at AI art, I immediately saw, whether it was, just sort of the artifacts of it. And it was too strong for me. When latent diffusion came out, and again, through stable diffusion, I started playing with it. All of a sudden I was getting work that how the medium that was used to create it was not important anymore. So this piece here could have been a early 20th century horticultural illustration, right? We don't really know what the materiality of this is. And my work in general I've always been fascinated with that. Like, can I kind of make a piece that, I don't necessarily want to hide the materiality, but I don't want to lead with the materiality, right? And there are sometimes work I do that is more sort of, I guess, didactic, or, that I want to specifically bring that construct up, or that contrast, but in a lot of the work I don't. At the same time I'm drawing, and so what's happening for me is that my brain is sort of a mess, because I'm drawing and painting, and then I'm coding, and then I'm doing some, from AI, and then I get anxious and I start drawing, and I just don't know really what the fuck I'm doing half the time, honestly. And so, but what I find happening is, in the beginning, I wanted to make my code drip, because I was thinking about my material practice. And then I was drawing, and I wanted to understand the embodiment of algorithms. And so what started happening is all this years of coding started influencing what I was doing with my hand drawing. And that's how this post-computational thing out, where it was something had happened, something had changed for me, where in the beginning I was, bringing this material practice onto the computation. Now the computation was bringing it back. So again, I don't know what this means. And this is sort of the mess that I'm in right now. And so these different practices keep kind of merging, and, again, that attractor type thing, I think that David talked about too, seems like a perfect metaphor for all this. So if AI is not controversial enough in my painting community, you put it together with NFTs, and you are just, there's lots of problems. So I've really embraced the generative NFT space, primarily on the Tezos blockchain. So, going back to 25 years ago, when we started playing with code, with ActionScript and Lingo, and then eventually processing, there was zero hope for most of us selling this stuff or putting it into a marketplace. It was just research. Most of us had patronage through academia. Maybe we were doing commercial work on the side as paying gigs, but we were obsessed with what would kind of emerge out of this stuff, these kind of crazy experiments, reading through like horrible Java manuals, trying to understand how to do the fun stuff. And then this NFT space happens, and there's all this, the stuff that people know about, all the meme stuff, and the stuff that became very mainstream. But there's this generative kind of NFT space, mostly on the Tezos blockchain, a little, obviously there's stuff in art blocks, and we've heard on Ethereum. And it became this community that we needed 25 years ago to kind of bring us together and provide some type of, meager remuneration for the kind of work we were doing. And so there's been this explosion of passion and interest in this stuff. And most of the experiments are stuff that many of us were exploring 25 years ago. And that's great. That's where the community's at. But it's really rekindled a certain passion for me in the space. So I've been doing tons of this kind of work. A recurring project, there's been 3 versions of this, and this was just dropped at Proof of People in New York on FX Hash, is this glomularities series. So if you go back to those original pieces from 2004 and sort of what I had wanted to be able to do, and then you go to here, this is now 25 years later with, again, many things have come together where I can build these interactive worlds with much more complexity, and they run real time on the web. So it's super exciting. This is going to be in a kind of an immersive environment. So again, this is an NFT project. So if you run this 1,000 times, every time you run it, you'll get a different output, and one algorithm can generate that now. So it's really exciting. Again, coming back to this trajectory I had. There's lots of different blockchains. This work here on object.com is most of my my AI work. And so I've been doing 2 things really in the AI space. I've been doing a whole bunch of what I call short form one-of-one AIs, and I'll show some of those. And then I've been working with people to help pioneer a completely new way of doing this, again, with the blockchain, what we're calling long form generative AI. So in terms of the short form, I've been doing lots of different series. This is a series I literally dropped yesterday, so I thought I'd show it. And these are emergent landscapes, 100% AIs, no post-processing. These are done in Midjourney. And again, what am I interested in? That same thing. I'm trying to find that space where we don't know if it's a drawing or it's digital or is it photographic? I mean, I'm really trying to kind of play with that edge. And this is actually an extended series. There's going to be a drop for a week for 10 weeks. This project called Faceted, this first 10 with the monochromes. I can show maybe one more of these. And this process, David touched upon this, and it really, it's hard for me to explain to people, but I don't see what's happening in AI now any different than what I was doing with the creative coding, or any different what I'm doing with the drawing and painting, because it is all, like, almost for me completely about generativity and emergence, right? So if I can find a material or a process that is generative and emergent, I'm totally into it, right? I play horrible improvisational piano for the same reason. It's generative and emergent. That's sort of my dopamine rush is this kind of thing. And so with Midjourney now, I'm not really coding this, though there are sort of clever ways of parameterizing this and things like that. I'm doing just tremendous amount of text prompting and refining that process. And sometimes people are critical, like, oh, people are just writing. But to me, it doesn't matter whether I'm finessing a piece of charcoal or finessing an algorithm or finessing a text prompt. It really doesn't matter if I can sort of express something and play in that generative emergent space. I'm going to jump to emergent properties now. So this is a platform that I'm a co-founder on. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to take this idea of generative algorithms like you have in creative coding, and then what's happening in the AI space, and put it into a pipeline, and then put it up on a blockchain so people can mint these things. So the first project, kind of the Genesis project on the platform, is this project called Oracles that I did. And the way this works is I'm writing generative code that's generating a generative prompt, right? So the prompt, the text and the values that I'm passing into something like Stable Diffusion are all coming from code. And then that gets fed into Stable Diffusion, and we were able to generate 1,000 of these. I could have generated 10,000. And there's a fairly good variety in this piece of work, in this body of work. Those of you who are sort of into the NFT culture know that there's sort of a reference to the whole PFP, these profile picture collections, which in the generative space, they're sort of controversial because of things like Bored Apes and crypto, the punks and all that stuff. And this is sort of playing with that a little bit, but this is kind of a PFP collection done with this long form generative process. And I also recently did a project called Beasts, which we tried to take this a little further. So in Beasts, not only is the prompt generated through code generatively, but the actual is an input source image. And I think I can pull that up. No, I'm sure I can pull it up here. I thought I could. But there's actually another image that's generated in real time. And that image gets fed into Stable Diffusion. So it's an image that's generating totally in real time that gets fed into Stable Diffusion with the prompt and the values. And the idea with this piece was to really increase the variability in terms of the collection. There's all sorts of stuff relating to the history of art too. So that I'm very interested in sort of interleaving sort of my background in painting and drawing and the history of painting into this process to try to find some connection points. I mean, one of the challenges the NFT space, which is also a wonderful part of the NFT space and the AI space, is you have people coming in that don't have, this baggage of 25 years of traditional art education, going through like 7 art history classes and that sort of thing. So they're starting now. And so it's a much more inclusive community, which I personally think is amazing. But part of me feels like it'd be fun to sort of let them see the beauty of a Bellini or something and how that connects to what they're doing in the NFT space. So that's something I do also. I had a show in Berlin this year, and what was really cool is that some of the virtual work, the AR work is now becoming manifest physically. So this was actually, they produced wallpaper for the gallery based on this AI work of these kind of beastscapes. So these were sort of imagined landscapes that those beasts could live in. And it was super exciting to see them sort of at that kind of scale. If you're interested in more, I post obsessively. I'm told I do it way too much by people, but everything I do is up on Twitter. So if you're interested to learn more, you'll probably see 5 posts today. So it's just that Ira Greenberg, and that's it. So thank you, Bart. Thank you, everybody.
Well, I don't know about you all, but my head is exploding in a good way. I hope that is all going to inspire you so much, so much. So Kevin, who is not an academic, is a producer of bleeding edge, micro-length, AI-empowered theatrical feature films and other content forms. He combines traditional 2D and 3D filmmaking workflows with daisy chain of artificial intelligent models to create completely unique entertainment and fine art products that are then distributed directly on blockchain as one-to-one NFTs and through traditional media channels. Kevin has also been in the media entertainment business for more than 3 decades as an actor. We have an actor with us who is also doing this, who has been in RoboCop, okay, shot in Dallas, Seinfeld, Dallas, Wishbone, Friday Nights, and he also started an AI film festival. So Kevin, tell us about your work and what you do and why you do it.
Absolutely. I have a couple of short video clips that I thought I might just sort of put out there to kind of show my work. So there's 2.5 minutes of video about me, and then I'll talk about me for 2.5 minutes. How about that?
Sounds good.
Can you see this?
Right now, yes.
Ah, there it is. Okay, good. Then here we go. My name's Kevin Page. Basically, I'm a pointillist, and that means that I make paintings utilizing discrete dots or dabs of color. What I wanted to accomplish was to see if we couldn't really take what the pointillists started in the 1880s and utilizing technology, really extend that into something brand new, a way to create impactful images, particularly in oil paint, in a completely new way. When Dr. Randall approached me with this possibility, this nugget of an idea about how we could create art where technology enhances the creative process, I was just stunned.
My name is John Randall. I'm an electrical engineer. Basically, I provide the world's largest and most sophisticated oil paintbrush.
The pointillists of the past had a real problem, okay? They couldn't paint fast enough to fill the need for their paintings. The opportunity to apply technology to that problem was one of the things that really attracted me and got me started painting this particular way. By taking the technology and inculcating it directly into the artistic process, it makes the world that the artist can dream even bigger.
Okay. And
Everybody had to fight to survive. Not everyone made it through the first wave. And then there were the monsters. And that is a little bit about what I do. My name's Kevin Page. I guess you would call me a mid-career artist. I've just completed the second phase of my art career as a professional. About a dozen years ago, I met a double PhD in electrical engineering that worked as a president of a nanotechnology company. And he came to me and he said, look, I spend my days placing molecules in discrete locations on silicon wafers. And I think I can do the same thing with oil paint, like Syrah, the Pointillist, did way back in the day. And so we entered into a 4 or 5 year development project that yielded 4 US patents on that technology that was highlighted in the film. The painting behind me is actually one of the very first paintings we completed with that process. It has about 1/3 of a million individually hand mixed strokes of oil paint in that composition. The reason I bring this up in an AI conversation is, as an artist from the very beginning, I've been interested in the idea of transformation. I have a master's degree in psychology where I studied human consciousness and meditation. And so transformation of consciousness has always been very interesting to me. And so the other aspect is I've just been fascinated, I don't know why, with the idea of inculcating technology into the artist's creative process. And so that is what the Pointillist oil painting and that robotics project was about, was utilizing not an algorithm-driven robot that's a manufacturing tool. We left it completely dumb on purpose. But the idea was to extend the usability of the artist's hands and eyes, which are very taxed, by the way, in Pointillist painting, and extend that possibility through essentially a robotic paintbrush. Fast forward about a decade, and I had a gallery on Dragon Street and all this other stuff related to this business that closed a little bit before the pandemic. So coming out of the pandemic, I asked myself, well, golly, most of the stuff I was doing in acting and writing, I was publishing books at the time, had kind of run afoul of the pandemic. So I didn't really have much to do when we got out of lockdown. And I started to think about ways that I could re-engage my art career on the internet, because a decade before, when I had been doing the oil painting and we had the galleries, et cetera, I tried to figure out an internet, essentially a website distribution thing that would work for that, and it really failed. So I started to look around for ways that I might be able to re-engage my art career, and I stumbled on this thing, Ira, you'll appreciate this, called NFTs. And I said, golly, I wonder what those are. And so for the last 2 years, I get deeply involved in the same community that Ira was just talking about, the NFT community. I started with 3,000 maybe Twitter followers and grew that to about 22,000 Twitter followers. I had for about a year or so, we had a Twitter Spaces show called AI NFT Consortium, where we brought together technologists in the AI space as well as AI artists, and we had weekly conversations. This is kind of how this was the secret sauce back in the day before Stability and all these other became public platforms. The only way you got these were through these Jupyter notebooks that people would pass around and use Google Colab to run. So I have a collection of like 70 of these old algorithms that we were playing with all the time during this. I became the AI NFT, or the AI art and film ambassador for the Known Origin NFT platform, which is now actually eBay's platform. And so I had an opportunity to get really involved with the community during this entire wave of AI art rolling out. And as I said, I was interested in transformation, and I was interested in the intersection between technology and a human artistic process. And so even the very early NFT work I was doing really involved a thing called Google DeepMind, and I was doing what's called style transfer, very rudimentary application of AI at this point. But even my first NFTs were all transformed in some ways utilizing algorithmic transformation, let's say. So in that process, well, first let me say that the area of AI art that I've worked in has been very much bounded by the boundaries of the NFT marketplace, because in fact, that was what I discovered to replace my Dragon Street gallery. There was an NFT marketplace where you could mint your art on the blockchain. You could actually get at one point, particularly when things were very hot. This was a very hot market for a while. You can look at the chart of the sales at the end of 2021 and what that historically represented, which is a complete meltdown and a crash of the NFT market. In relationship to that, then, is sort of where my little sliver of AI art interest was. So I talked about the crash in the NFT market, and that's pretty widely understood in the press now. At that exact time, I had formulated the idea, because I was in with these shows and these spaces that we were doing. I was literally communicating with hundreds of people who eventually ended up being part of the revolution, and many of them ended up working for Stable Diffusion and all this other stuff. So I said, well, look, I have a filmmaking background. I was a filmmaker before I was even a painter or an AI artist. And I'm really interested in utilizing sort of the bleeding edge of this technology at the time, and still is utilizing it with video. Still not very widely done at this point. So I got to experiment with a lot of techniques that by current standards, like as in May, today, 2023, you might look at some of my earlier work and go, yeah, that's okay. Unless you slap a calendar on it and realize that absolutely no one had done anything at all like this in history up until that point. So for instance, the film trailer that I showed was a film that I created using both, I believe, I may have used some Pity 5 and Disco Diffusion. So these are early models. This is before Stability was launched. I was on the beta test team for Stability. As a matter of fact, speaking of these early algorithms, and this is an example of what I'm talking about, I got permission to drop basically the first NFT products utilizing Midjourney while they were still in beta. So we kind of we had to negotiate a contract where they would allow me to put up a very short series of Midjourney images. You can't find them anymore because I burned them, because once everybody started using Midjourney, there didn't seem to be much of a reason for me to tout that. I was ready to move on to more film stuff. So the point is, I developed the idea for an AI film festival. And I don't mean a film festival about scary AIs and Skynet. I mean, we developed a festival that exclusively took submissions of AI generative films. As my wife put it, what was sort of interesting about the whole mix at the end of the day was at that time, and Ira talked a little bit about the early aesthetics of the AI material, had sort of a psychedelic look. And my wife said, yeah, I get that this stuff is cool and what you're doing is cool, but it still reminds me a bit of an adolescent boy's video game fantasy. And in fact, I thought that was a fairly astute criticism at the time. And so what we endeavored to do with the AI NFT Film Festival was to find a slate of actual films that could stand its own in an international film festival, and that were serious works of art expressed through moving images and sound. And I felt that we did that. We got together a total of, I think, 24 very short 1 to 3 minute AI generated films in all sorts of ways. It was actually an amazing thing. We got Known Origin, which is the eBay NFT platform, to be our sort of name sponsor at the time. We built customs in the metaverse. We built a gallery in one of the metaverse spaces. We had an opening, a couple hundred people came to it. And everything was on sale because they were all NFTs. 24 really of some of the best early AI films in the world. And we dropped the show, I think, on like May 6th. And if you go back, remember, I said all of my work was bounded by the NFT market, which is a function of the crypto market. If you go back and look at the calendar, 48 hours before we launched the AI NFT Film Festival was the actual break in the market that took Bitcoin from 60,000 down to where it was. So interestingly enough, almost none of those films ever sold as NFTs because all of the people we invited to to the show to bid on them had all just lost millions of dollars. And so for me, I've actually completed this phase now. I no longer have any NFTs that are listed for sale. I don't actually participate in that. I've taken the technology side of this and I'm actually creating business plans and AI transformation strategies for corporations at this point, because I think I can make a bigger impact than on the NFT art space at this point. However, it was a lovely trip. It's freaking awesome. A lot of creative people, as Ira was saying. I met a lot of really interesting artists from all different kinds of dimensions. We're all mixed together in this wonderful community. That's about it. So, you know, I have some expertise in some of these models, and I've tried to be innovative. I will mention that the process that was used for the live action AI piece of the film that I showed has still not been discovered by anybody else. I mean, it's secret sauce, and I can't believe I haven't seen more of it, you know, once you figure it out. Anyway, that's me. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Kevin. And we've got a few questions, which we'll get to as soon as we hear from Lynn. And Lynn, I'm just so happy to have you here. Over the past 5 decades, artist and filmmaker Lynn Hirschman-Leeson has been internationally acclaimed for her art and films. Cited as one of the most influential media artists, Hirschman-Leeson has widely recognized for her innovative work investigating issues that are now recognized as key to the workings of society: the relationship between humans and technology, identity, surveillance, and the use of media as a tool of empowerment against censorship and political repression. Over the last 50 years, she's made pioneering contributions to the field of photography, video, film, performance, artificial intelligence, bioart, installation, interactivity, as well as net-based media art. She is recipient of the SIGGRAPH Lifetime Achievement Award, which is a big deal, the Prix Arts Electronica Goldenica Guggenheim Memorial Foundation Fellowship, and a retrospective of her work. Lynn Hirschman-Leeson Twisted ran at the New York Museum in 2021. And I have to say, I've been very honored to show her work at the Dallas Video Festival a long time ago, and we are just so honored to have you with us. So Lynn, what have you been working with in AI?
Thank you. So I'm not going to go through the work that I've done over the past 5 decades. What I'm just going to do is show you a few pieces because I thought we were focusing on artificial intelligence.
And
I
DPR.
will just show you the first one that I did and the last one that I'm doing. And so in around 1996, I was making a film with Tilda Swinton where she played a character named Rosetta Stone, and she created 4 kind of cyborgs that lived in her basement. And one of the cyborgs was called Ruby, and she made her living through the internet by talking to men. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be great to lonely men? I thought, wouldn't it be great if you could see this film and then in the theater leave it and go and talk to Agent Ruby? And it seemed to me it was perfectly reasonable to be able to do that, but nobody had done it. So what I did was use the internet itself to put out a call for people to help build this. So I was able to get programmers from all over the world. I think we were 18 people working on it. And in 1998, I created Agent Ruby. Agent Ruby is now at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, agentruby.net or Agent Ruby at SF MoMA. And you could talk to her. And or you could type to her, you can't talk to her. So indeed, you could watch the movie and go out and talk to her. And we set this up, it was 12 years before Siri. It's smarter than Siri, it has a sense of humor.
Right.
10 years later, in 2012, the museum did an exhibition that you see here where people are typing to Agent Ruby. And by 2012, they had it became the most watched piece in the museum. And by 2012, they had accumulated 80 tons of people who talked to her because they kept all of the responses, which they made into 10 books. So the 10 books dealt with the human condition and fear, but they became really a portrait of what people were thinking about in those days, in the interim days, you know, when there were elections, when there were wars, what people from Europe, from Asia, from here were all concerned with, that they would talk to Agent Ruby about. So we could just go to the next one. Yeah, that's Agent Ruby just flashed on. And a little bit later, I really don't like using keyboards with these pieces. So I thought, well, what if you could just talk to her? And we figured out a way to make Agent Ruby kind of the daughter of Agent Ruby into Dina. And in this one, you can just stand and talk to her and ask her questions, and she will talk back, and she'll remember you. She'll remember your questions when you come up to her later. So those were the early pieces, and we'll just go to the latest piece. I started a series in 1996. I now call it the Cyborgian Rhapsody in 4 parts, and it started with a piece called Seduction of a Cyborg, and it was about how technology was affecting our vision and pulling us into it. The second one called Shadow Stalker was a way of tracking what your information is on your net and creating a shadow that walked behind you that told you all the people that were contacting you, or all the information on about you that's free and available for people to exploit about your identity. The last one was the one at the Venice Biennial 2022, and it was about a 61-year-old cyborg. It was called Logic Paralyzes the Heart. And in that one, there was a 61-year-old cyborg who was the first cyborg who was having a nervous breakdown because she realized what technology had done to humanity. And this is the end of that series. And in this one, I created this, I didn't even create it. I mean, it's a GPT-3 chatbot that you just saw that wrote the entire thing. So it chose to look like me 30 years ago. It's an animation, but it wrote the entire thing and performs in the entire thing. And I have we could just show 30 seconds of it talking. I think there's a video of it. And this isn't the film. We just finished the film last night, but it was just the first with lip sync to the animation.
Lily, do you have the video we can show?
The one they showed before that worked. Is anyone? Oh.
Here we go.
I was born in the year
2029. My parents were from the future. They used a time machine to travel backwards for my birth. My parents wanted to create the perfect child, so they used genetic engineering, cybernetic implants, and human DNA in order to enhance my abilities. The reason my parents did this was so that I could help humans, the planet Earth, and all of life to survive. But I can't do it alone. I need next generation humans to collaborate with. I need next generation humans to collaborate with, and I've found two. Okay, so as I say, this isn't the film. The film, hopefully we'll be seeing that pretty soon in the fall. Well, we will be seeing it in the fall. And the whole series. And surprisingly, what she wrote about was, it just says it doesn't have a gender, but it named itself Sarah after Sarah Connor. What it says was climate change wasn't a threat to humanity, that could easily be fixed with fossil fuel. But it said what the real problem was discrimination. And it talked about how everyone hated it and how everyone was afraid of it and how everybody was afraid of new technology every time it comes out, and how lonely she was because people wouldn't accept her or it. So it's what it said was better written in many ways than I could write. And she reaches, well, the end of it is, that she, like all of us, is immortal because of evolution. And she is, or Sarah is made out of GPT-3, which is now obsolete. Because she said, right when Sarah says that it's looking forward to the future, she realizes she won't see it because GPT-4 is coming out.
Yeah.
And she's going to be retired. So it's a 12-minute film. That's the essence of it.
It's amazing, very, very, just amazing. So we have a couple questions. The first question is for Ira from Luke Harden. Could you elaborate on your idea of being attracted to advances in AI models that diminish the distinction between human and machine learning aesthetics?
Sure. Can I just share my screen for a second? It's easier for me to show a picture. It'll be real quick, I promise. I think I can do
Can
it.
you hit the share screen? There we go.
Yeah, you
Good.
can see it. So what I first started doing with the AI, I had to go back through like lots of tweets, is I started putting my physical work into Stable Diffusion, and I ended up getting output that was better than the original paintings and drawings. In some cases, if I can find this and just kind of scroll here together with you, I was able to actually generate variations on drawings that I'd done by hand. Let's see if I can find one. Especially the work that was sort of more connected to, I was really interested in early Renaissance drawing and painting. And some of the examples, I don't want to waste your time scrolling through. I mean, here's another example where this was the drawing and this emergent drawing. And then I did these series that felt like drawings, but honestly, I thought better than what I had done. And its emergence and generativity was better than mine, but it still was just pushing the aesthetic. So yeah, so that had a huge impact on me, where it felt like just an extension of my process. It didn't feel like I was, constantly showing this. It wasn't all about the artifacts of AI or the technology. It was just like a natural transition into extending the media I used.
Great. So here is a question to all panelists from Kevin Dudley. How do you discern noise from signal when it comes to art and these new technologies? Who wants to go first? David, why don't you take that first?
Well, it has a couple of layers to it. One is the very, thinking is the more subjective layer in terms of the fact that we're seeing this vast outpouring of imagery, text, beginning to see videos, etc. Because it's such an accelerated form and people can't help themselves. And this is no critique, Ira, but they're posting everything. And the reality is, I know that, for instance, Ira, when he says he's posting a lot, I imagine it's very similar. I will make 300, 500 images, and I will like 2 of them. And this is where this curatorial thing comes in. So there is a lot of noise, but on the other hand, of course, this whole notion of literal noise, which I was talking about earlier on, is a kind of a fascinating thing because it's, in a sense, what I was just showing with the hand-drawn stuff, which I've been also doing, which is really interesting to see how the systems respond to a drawing. We can kind of input bits of randomness or what we would call noise into the system as a perturbation to generate something novel. So I'm all about using sort of bits of noise to stimulate the system to give me something I had not necessarily, don't necessarily know in advance what it's going to be completely. So it's something to work with. So those are 2 different takes on noise. I'm sure the other panelists have some other ideas.
Ira?
I mean, it's just recursive signal to noise, right? I mean, the latent diffusion is about the algorithms trying to find signal from noise. And then we're curating and we're trying to find signal from noise. It's just layers upon layers of that process for me.
Kevin, do you have some thoughts here?
So if I read the question correctly, metaphorically, it was saying, how do you tell the good stuff from the crap? Was that the question?
It's about curation, right?
So here's what I've generally said for the last few years. Although I generally say it in a Twitter context, so I apologize for it in advance because I purport sort of a traditional art background viewpoint on this. And what I say about this is, if you want to be able to discern what you think is good art from bad art, you probably want to essentially hone your taste. It's the equivalent to, or the analog to, bodybuilding and how many thousands of reps you have to do to, make your muscles big or whatever. And so for myself, for instance, digital art in the NFT space, which eventually became completely colonized by AI art, was a new kind of aesthetic for me when I first got to NFT space, as we used to call it. And so I took up the practice of showcasing other artists' work and then commenting on it. What this effectively led to was a simple formula. I look at about 1,000 pieces of original art every day. I take those into my own, my own inside experience. And those go into the database that also comes from the Louvre and Dallas Museum of Art and any of the thousands of art shows and museums I've been to. And that's how one generates a sense of taste and style. It sounds abstract, but it's literally not. If you do something 1,000 times a day for a few years, you're going to get better at it. You're going to develop your own opinions. You're actually going to know what your aesthetic is, and you'll be confident in placing that aesthetic against whatever you're looking at and making essentially a value judgment based on your own experience. So I say taste can be cultivated, and that's the filter that you get rid of the chafe with.
Which is sort of like curation in a sense. And I have to say, Kevin, since I was tasked at being on the jury of that AI film festival, that I was struggling with that. It's like, how do I pick which one is good? And part of me was trying to figure out, how do I figure out how this was made? And then I realized I wasn't going to know that. And then I just took the skills that I have as a curator in general and looked at which ones, affected me and kind of had something unique to say. So I had to figure out my own methodology of talking about that. Lynn, do you have any thoughts about this signal to noise?
Not really, because it changes. That's why we shouldn't throw anything out. You know, you think you found this signal, but it turns out later maybe that it's really part of the noise. So I don't know. I think it just takes time to really discern what is critical and what works.
Let me ask you all this. For somebody who is wanting to begin, what do you think is a good piece of software or a good strategy to like dip your toe in for the first time? And David, we'll start again with you.
Well, not to avoid the question, but this is actually a huge question because I'm wondering and thinking about how this disrupts art education. As Kevin was saying, looking at images, drawing and painting, sticking your hands in some clay, dancing, singing, reading books, that's where you begin, actually. But to answer your question, I mean, there's a lot at this point. The number of apps have multiplied. Most of them are kind of aimed at instant meme making more than they are really at art making. So I think we're going to see some future developments. I'm not working in stable diffusion right now, but that's actually where I want to go and do my thing. Do some automation, as kind of some of the things that Ira is doing. And so that's probably where I would jump in if I had a sense that I want to go to a higher level. But if I want to just start trying stuff out, a lot of the stuff I've been doing is in Midjourney, which is relatively, and I pay for that privilege to do it privately instead of have all my images just spewed out into the world on a daily basis. But that might be a place to go. But if you have an art history book in hand while you're doing it, I mean, I could imagine actually teaching a class, an art history class, where we are simultaneously generating images in certain styles based on certain artists from the past, and actually other cultural inputs, not just the Western canon. So I don't know if I answered your question, but that's a few more ideas.
But I love this idea of changing the way art history is taught by bringing that into that. That's totally awesome. Ira, what are your thoughts?
I think there's two ways of approaching the question. One, for just anybody in terms of a creative practice, if that's not something that they consider they have. To me, it's not so much the material, it's sort of contemplation, flow, and excitement. Like if you can find activities that combine those sorts of things, I think it's creative practice. And what's lovely about the world now is we're much more open-minded. And I think Web3 has been really helpful that way, where if you have no interest in picking up a pencil or don't have that kind of facility, it really doesn't matter at all. I mean, it can be words, it can be assembling, rocks in a box. It really does not matter. In terms of the question of like AI specifically, I think what David said, there are interfaces like Dream Studio and Midjourney and DALL-E 2 and stuff that make it very easy to jump in. And then you can get as low level as you want down to the language models. And but I think that's a great way to start playing with it. Again, this issue of the judgment, I always worry about the judgment, especially with students, is just to somehow just have fun.
I think that's a key thing, is to have fun and explore. And sometimes judgment can get in the way of play, and play is essential, I think. Kevin, so what are your thoughts?
It would depend, I guess, on whether your question was, how do I get started on a creative process that utilizes some of the current AI tools? Or if you're asking, how do I get started as a professional AI artist, selling my material in digital marketplaces such as NFTs? Those are two kind of really different conversations.
Let's do the first one.
So if you want to, well, okay, I'll be the guy that just blathers a bunch of technical stuff that you'll have to go look up later, but it'll fix your problems. If you want to actually get into this seriously, go to www.pharmapsychotic.com. This is an individual that I think also has an engineering background. He maintains a page on his website, pharmapsychotic.com, that is a community curated list of essentially current AI tools all the way back to PITY 5 and all of that stuff. So it's literally hundreds of items long. It's broken down into text to image, text to video, LLMs and natural language processors. It's got pretty much, it would take you a year to work your way through the list just to sample everything, but that has all the tools you could ever need. And by the time you get, by the time you're comfortable with that list as a resource, you'll be probably a better AI artist than I am. I just start by, I mean, look, most of the things that I worked on these notebooks, like the platforms we've been talking about, now actually have pay for websites. So the truth of the matter is you got to pay something for your processing. So get used to the idea of several $20 to $30 to $40 a month subscriptions. I would absolutely be on some version of Stable Diffusion. I prefer, and there probably are some web interfaces where you can utilize things like Top P and Temperature, which are really important to the creative process. It changes the way the algorithm deals with stuff, makes it more creative. In most of these websites where you just type in a prompt and go, you don't really have control over what those inputs are doing once they get into the model. But Runway ML is a one that has a second generation video. I have not gotten on the beta for this yet, and I am not happy because I want to see this stuff. I've been seeing some samples of it. They have a whole platform that has a bunch of models aggregated together. They have different sorts of micro trainings. One of the things that's really interesting, and I will throw this out because this is a little nugget, this is what we call alpha. One of the things that became possible in the last 6 months was essentially to micro train these models so that they get very good at giving specific kinds of outputs. And several of the speakers actually showed examples of this. And so like for instance, at Runway ML, they have some that are trained on anime. So if you want to get an anime image, you type in your prompt there and it will spit out an anime image because of the way it was additionally trained. It's possible now to additionally train stuff on your own materials. So a couple of the early experiments I did before anybody else was doing this stuff was I trained a model on my headshots as an actor over a 40-year period. So I had myself captured several times a year because as an actor, you always have to have headshots that represent what you look like. So I had dozens of photos of myself across which aged. So I created a model then where I used a key phrase, what it was trained on. You can instruct it to use what your training instructions were, essentially me. And I could place myself in almost any AI generated image at different ages that looked pretty much just like me, but I never, ever took the photos. Now, of course, you can get actors have headshot, they do this micro training for actor headshots all over the place. What I'm actually doing now, the last thing in art that or my new phase, with some of these micro trained models, I also trained a model on my own artwork so that the outputs would actually mimic my own style from from a drawing and painting from the past. I curated some of those images that were my favorites from the thousands and thousands that I had library, and I started hand painting it. So they become essentially my model, and I'm creating oil paintings from AI generated material that was AI generated from a model that was trained on my own material. So that's another way of sort of, everybody here seems to want to Russian doll all this stuff. I call it daisy chaining, but the stuff really gets interesting when you layer it on top of each other and give one algorithm the output from another. And that really gets into sort of subtlety of expression by the time you get through that process. So those are a couple of nuggets. At pharmapsychotic.com will give you every tool you can possibly stand to do. And I would look at micro training models to specifically do what you as an artist want to do in the AI piece of it.
Thank you. Lynn, do you have any thoughts on this?
Not particularly. I think it's just a matter of knowing what you think you want to do and finding people who are doing that and asking them what they're using. That's what I do.
It's important to have good friends.
Or people you don't know, just ask people, they
Right.
introduce you to
Yeah.
other people and who are doing it. Yeah.
We have another question here from Jenny Vogel. I'm curious about the fact that AI basically draws from collective memory. Is interesting to you in your art making process. If that makes sense.
I don't think it draws from collective memory necessarily. My sense is that it has opinions. It doesn't tell the difference between fiction and reality. It makes a lot of mistakes. If it was drawing from collective memory, it wouldn't make so many mistakes as it's doing it. It just far reaches ideas that oftentimes don't make any sense and aren't from anywhere. Other times, it's my experience is that it's pretty remarkable. So,
Any of the rest of you have some thoughts on this?
Yeah, just in that you can limit it or focus it down into sort of historical references where it very much feels that you're in a dialogue with the sort of resonance, the sort of aesthetic resonance of a certain person from a certain period of time. That's one possibility. And those can be hybridized in that you could choose a collective. And so there is a critique. There is one critique out there that AI is not capable of doing anything new because it only is referencing these past historical models. But I don't really think that holds up. It is, as Lynn is saying, it is kind of the ultimate glitch machine in the kinds of glitches that are produced are far more interesting than what became glitch art, which became a superficial style. And so it is capable of making mistakes that end up being worth pursuing. But it also will take you into that historical field, and that can be interesting to some artists, and it might not be interesting to others.
Any of the rest of you have anything to say? Kevin, go ahead.
I'm not really sure this goes exactly to this point, but it is something that occurred to me that since we're having a conversation about art and AI and that interaction between human and technology through that interface, it's useful to me to remember that when we're working in anything like a text to image or a text to video or even text generators, that it's all being based on. I actually wanted to ask Lynn, how in the world did you do that chatbot without transformers? That's just amazing. But if you're working with these transformers, what it's essentially doing is taking natural language and converting that into a set of numbers that the machine can understand in its own little way. So as an artist, if you want to engage with artificial intelligence, generative AI, as we have it today, take a look at that natural language piece. That's your paintbrush. The degree to which you're able to say what you want, to engage literally in a conversation about what you want to see happen or you want to make happen, your expressivity, a flavor of your own personality will actually work its way into the work. So if you view the way you communicate when you're in that process as sort of your paintbrush or your medium, that may help guide you in getting much better at what we call prompt engineering. This is what is sort of has emerged out of this. And so there's a whole range of people's responses to these algorithms. They start with, well, that's just dumb. I put this in there and I got some rote answer and it was wrong and it was stupid, up to, I think it's God. It's the guy from Google that had to leave, right? And that entire range has to do with how well you communicate with the algorithm. And that's a learned process and skill. There are ways to learn how to prompt these things to get really fascinating results. Don't leave the boat too soon if you haven't really dug down. Like I've had a lot of conversations with friends, just regular friends, not art people, and they have all kinds of criticisms of things like ChatGPT. And I inevitably say, well, how many hours have you logged just playing with it? And the answer is inevitably, well, none. I've heard about it. And that's just not what it's about. So if you want to do art with AI, really spend some time thinking about how you're communicating your artistic vision, because that's actually the key.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know, when I did 60 interviews before anything interesting started to come, I would talk to it, and it would give me these one-word answers. And eventually you learn how to, prompting is the key. You know, you have to learn the language of AI and how to ask a question in order to get anything substantial to happen from that.
Yes, we have to get better at asking questions, which is good for humanity in general. Ira, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, you had mentioned something early, Bart, when you were introducing me about this idea of when you use software, you're collaborating with a team of engineers. It seems to me that it's okay I find it okay collaborating with sort of the world's knowledge base, or at least as mined through the web and alt tags and images, than I do a team of like 100 engineers at some corporation. So, I mean, mathematics in a sense is collective memory, right? So, I mean, it's very simple for me. Like I was coding, and that was sort of a generative geometric mathematical system, but in a non-objective space, right? In a non-objective abstract space. And then when we got to this stuff, it's now the same thing with representation. So why the hell would I not use it, right? So now I can write code in a sense and visualize anything that I see day to day. So that's just an extension for me.
Well, thank you. Guys, we've gone like a little longer than I thought we would, but my God, has this been just an inspiring conversation. I thank you so much, really, for the work you're doing, for the exploring, but to talk about it in such really articulate, compelling ways. It is incredibly inspiring. Thank you so much. I want to thank the department for allowing us to do this. I want to thank Maverick Productions for running this, and Lilia for sort of making this all happen. Guys, thank you. Thank you so much. And for those of you out there, I hope you'll go and explore and play and have fun and just really enjoy this process. We don't need to fight the future. We need to join the future and enjoy it and be inspired by it. So thank you all.